I wasn't supposed to hear what my daughter said. The nurse thought I was unconscious. The doctor had already walked away. The curtain was half closed, the room quiet except for the soft beep of machines keeping track of a body everyone assumed was no longer listening. But I was, and what I heard that day changed the meaning of the word mother forever. Before I continue, if stories like this matter to you, stories about family, betrayal, strength, and quiet justice, please subscribe to my channel, Grandama Moments. These stories are real, and they carry lessons we don't learn until it's almost too late. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching right now? My name is Margaret Collins. I am 72 years old. I have been a mother for 46 of those years. And until that moment, I believed, without question, that motherhood was the safest place a woman could ever stand. I was wrong. I didn't grow up with much. I was raised in a small town where people measured wealth by how long your word lasted, not how big your house was. I married young, not because I was naive, but because I was certain. My husband, Robert, was a quiet man. He worked hard, came home tired, and loved deeply without saying much. Together, we built a life that looked ordinary from the outside, but felt solid from within. Our daughter, Elaine, was born on a rainy afternoon in October. I still remember how tightly she wrapped her fingers around mine, as if she already understood that the world could be unkind. From that moment on, everything I did was for her. Every sacrifice made sense. Every long night, every postponed dream, every dollar saved instead of spent, it all had a purpose. Elaine grew up surrounded by stability, not luxury but consistency. We taught her manners, values, and patience. We taught her that love wasn't loud, that respect wasn't optional, and that family came before comfort. Or at least, that's what I thought we taught her. When Robert passed away 8 years ago, something shifted. Not in her, she cried, she mourned, but in me, I became quieter, smaller somehow. The house felt too large for one person, yet I refused to leave it. That house wasn't just property, it was history. It was every birthday cake baked in the kitchen, every argument resolved in the living room, every night Robert fell asleep on the couch with the television murmuring softly. Elaine suggested I move closer to her. She lived in another state with her husband. She said it would be safer, easier, better. I said no, not because I didn't trust her, but because I trusted myself. We spoke often. Phone calls every few days. Visit when time allows. She asked about my health, my bills, my routines. Sometimes she sounded concerned. Sometimes distracted. I didn't think much of it. Children grow busy. Life pulls them away, that's normal. Or so I told myself. The plane crash happened on a Tuesday, or at least, that's when they believed it happened. I had taken a short domestic flight to attend my cousin's memorial. I remember boarding the plane feeling unusually tired. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I assumed it was nerves. Flying always made me uneasy. I closed my eyes as the plane taxied, whispered a quiet prayer, and promised myself I'd rest when I arrived. That's the last clear memory I have before waking up in the hospital. Later, I was told I had suffered a severe cardiac episode mid-flight. The plane made an emergency landing. Paramedics rushed me out before most passengers even understood what was happening. There was confusion, delays, a miscommunication, somewhere between the airline and hospital systems. By the time Elaine received the call, she didn't hear "Your mother is stable." She heard "Your mother was on a flight that went down." And she believed I was dead. When I woke up, everything felt distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My eyes were closed, but my mind was awake. I heard voices drift in and out, nurses, doctors, machines. And then a familiar voice. Elaine. She sounded calm, too calm. She spoke with the doctor first, asking careful questions. Was there brain activity? Was there a chance I'd regain consciousness? What kind of recovery could be expected if I survived? Then the doctor stepped away to retrieve my chart. That's when she leaned closer. She lowered her voice and she said it. "Mom's plane crashed. They don't think she'll wake up. Finally, we can sell everything." I didn't gasp, I didn't cry, I didn't move. But something inside me went very still. At that moment, I understood something terrifyingly clear. My daughter had already buried me, not with grief, but with relief. I wanted to scream. I wanted to open my eyes and ask her how she could say something like that. I wanted to remind her of scraped knees I kissed better, of nights I stayed awake waiting for her to come home, of the way I held her hand when her father died. But my body betrayed me, so I listened. She made a phone call. I could hear her pacing. She talked about the house, the savings, the paperwork. She spoke efficiently, almost practically, as if she were organizing a closet, not dismantling a life. She wouldn't want it to go to waste, she said. I wondered when she decided she knew what I wanted. When she finally left the room, I lay there in silence. The machines kept beeping. The world kept turning, and I stared into the darkness behind my closed eyes, replaying her words again and again. Finally, we can sell everything. I didn't fall asleep after that. I didn't need to. I was wide awake in a way I had never been before. Over the next few days, I learned how to pretend. I pretended not to hear conversations. Pretended not to notice when Elaine visited less frequently once doctors began using words like stable and responsive. Pretended not to feel the distance growing between us like a cold wall. She smiled when she spoke to me, held my hand, told me to rest, but her eyes were elsewhere, always calculating, always waiting for me to disappear. What she didn't know was that something inside me had already changed. I survived, not just the medical emergency, but the truth. And once a mother survives the truth about her child, she never looks at love the same way again. That was only the beginning. When I finally opened my eyes, the room looked different, not brighter, not darker, just quieter. The machines were still there, their steady beeping filling the space, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't feel weak anymore. I felt alert, awake in a way that had nothing to do with my body. The nurse noticed first. She leaned over me, her voice gentle, asking if I could hear her. I blinked once, then again. That was all it took for the room to come alive with movement. Doctors stepped closer, someone adjusted the IV, someone else called my name. My daughter was nowhere in sight. Later, they told me it was a miracle, that the odds hadn't been good, that my heart had struggled longer than expected. I nodded and thanked them because that's what polite people do. But inside, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about words. Finally, we can sell everything. Those words didn't fade when I woke up. They didn't soften. They didn't lose their sharp edges. They stayed exactly as they were, clear, deliberate, spoken without fear or hesitation. Words said by someone who believed I was already gone. When my daughter returned, she rushed to my bedside with practiced urgency. Her eyes widened, her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment she looked exactly how a daughter should look when she realizes her mother is still alive. "Oh my God," she said. "Mom, you're awake." I looked at her, really looked. Her face was carefully arranged, concern in the eyes, relief in the voice, warmth measured just enough. It was a performance I recognized. I had taught her how to be polite, how to speak kindly, how to look people in the eye and say the right thing. I didn't ask where she had been. I didn't ask who she was on the phone with earlier. I didn't ask what she meant by everything. I just nodded and said her name. She smiled then, a relieved smile, the kind that comes when a problem solves itself. The doctors spoke to her in low voices outside the room. I caught fragments, stable, monitoring. Recovery will take time. She nodded along, playing the role again, the devoted daughter, the worried family member, and I let her. Because somewhere between drifting in and out of consciousness, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her in a hospital bed. I wasn't going to cry, accuse, or demand explanations. I had learned something far more valuable than answers. I had learned the truth. Recovery was slow, painful, quiet. My daughter visited every day at first. She brought flowers once, then stopped. She brought soup, then switched to store-bought snacks. Each visit grew shorter, her phone buzzing more frequently in her hand. She talked about errands, meetings, paperwork that couldn't wait. Paperwork, that word followed me home. When I was finally discharged, she insisted I stay with her for a while. She said it would be easier, safer, that my house was too big for me now. Too much responsibility. I smiled and told her I preferred my own bed. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she nodded and said she understood. But things changed after that. She began asking questions, casual questions, carefully phrased. Did I remember where I kept certain documents? Have I ever made a will? Was the house still entirely in my name, or had my late husband's share complicated things? She asked as if she were helping, as if she were preparing for my future. I answered vaguely. sometimes truthfully, sometimes not at all. What she didn't know was that, while my body was healing, my mind was working. During those long hospital nights, I had remembered every signature I'd ever placed on paper, every document I'd trusted her to explain, every time I nodded instead of reading closely, because she was my daughter, and daughters don't take from their mothers. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer a week after I got home. I didn't tell her. The lawyer was a quiet man with kind eyes. He didn't rush me. He didn't interrupt when my voice shook. I didn't repeat my daughter's words exactly. I didn't need to. I just said I had reason to believe my assets were being discussed as if I were already gone. He nodded. He'd heard this before. We went through everything. The house, the savings, the documents I had signed years ago, trusting the explanations I was given. He explained what could be changed, what couldn't, what needed protection. I walked out of that office lighter than I had felt in years, not because I was angry, because I was clear. My daughter noticed the change soon after. I stopped deferring. I stopped saying, "You decide." When she brought up selling the house again, framed as concern for my health, I told her calmly that the house was not for sale. She frowned. She reminded me of expenses, of practicality, of how much easier things would be if I downsized. I told her I was comfortable. That word unsettled her. Comfortable. She pressed harder after that, suggested listings, mentioned offers, talked about the market as if it were a ticking clock. I listened politely. I nodded. And then I changed the subject. One evening, she finally asked outright, "Mom," she said, "have you changed something legally? You've been different." I looked at her across the table, the same table where she once did her homework, where I packed her lunches, where I held her hand after her first heartbreak. "Yes," I said, "I have." Her face went still. "I realized something while I was unconscious," I continued. "I realized that being alive isn't the same as being respected. And I deserve both." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Whatever response she had prepared didn't fit anymore. I didn't tell her what I had changed. I didn't need to. Boundaries don't require explanations. They require consistency. She visits less now. When she does, she's careful with her words. Too careful. She asks how I'm feeling, but she doesn't linger. She no longer talks about the house. She no longer talks about everything. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that hospital room, about the ceiling lights, about the sound of her voice when she thought I couldn't hear. I don't repeat it bitterly. I replay it with gratitude. Because if I hadn't heard her say those words, I might still be living half awake, present in body, absent in authority. I might still be confusing love with trust and trust with silence. I survived a plane crash that never happened. I survived something far worse. I survived the moment my child thought my life was already over and planned accordingly. And I am still here, not angry, not broken, just awake. If this story touched something in your heart, subscribe to Grandama Moments. Because some truths are too painful to ignore and too important not to tell.